To most of you, it's probably no surprise that a title of northernmost people in the world belongs to the various Inuit groups in North America, places such as the far north of Canada, Alaska, and Greenland. But what about here? What about outside of North America? Let me introduce you to the Nganasan people and their beautiful Nganasan language, who proudly hold the title of the northernmost ethnic group of the Eurasian continent. The word Nganasan means people in general, but the Nganasan people call themselves just Nya, which means friend. They have historically lived around the Taimyr Peninsula in Russia, around this general area, from the Golchicha River in the west to Khatanga Bay in the east. This area also includes Cape Chelyuskin, the northernmost point of the entire Afro-Eurasian continent, not including the islands. When it comes to population, the most recent survey from Russia is from 2010, which lists around 860 people who identified as Nganasan. However, there's another survey, this one relating to native language, this one from 2020, which lists around 416 people who claimed their native language to be Nganasan. And at first, you look at it and you think, wow, that's half the population. That's generally pretty good for an endangered language. But unfortunately, the reality is likely much, much bleaker. According to a 2020 study by the University of Helsinki, with hardly more than 100 elderly and middle-aged speakers surviving today, and with virtually no children fluent in Nganasan. I also found another source from 1989, which lists 1,061 people, and in a different source from 1987, listing 500 people. So if these sources are to be believed and ordered chronologically, that's a very steep decline and very fast. I'll touch on the community and the people themselves a tiny bit at the end, but the main reason I wanted to talk about Nganasan is just how way out there it is in terms of classification. This video is definitely going to be a bit more linguistically technical in nature, more so than my usual videos, but I promise this stuff is also mind-blowing. Officially, the Nganasan language is classified as being a part of the Samoyedic branch of the Uralic language family. So technically, it's very, very, very distantly related to languages such as Finnish, Estonian, and Hungarian. In fact, under a video on the subject by I Love Languages on YouTube, you can see a few comments by Hungarians saying how, despite understanding nothing, it seems strangely familiar and you can notice the tiniest of similarities. Now, apart from Nganasan, the Samoyedic branch also includes Tundra Nenets, Forest Nenets, Enets, and Selkup, all of which are different languages and have their own fascinating histories and cultures, stories for another time. Keep in mind that despite being closely related, these are different languages and they definitely aren't readily mutually intelligible. The Samoyedic languages are theorized to have split off first from Proto-Uralic and are meant to be super ancient and rather divergent from the rest. And when it comes to Nganasan, it's considered to be the most divergent Samoyedic language, so it's the most divergent language of the most divergent branch, making it technically the most divergent Uralic language. Geographically, it's also the easternmost Samoyedic language, and therefore the easternmost surviving Uralic language. So what makes Nganasan so divergent? Let's dive a bit into the linguistics of it all. Russian linguist Eugene Helimsky wrote in 1993, "The Nganasan language, insufficiently investigated until recently, seems to deserve a special prize for archaic relics." We can discuss this all day, and trust me, there's a lot to discuss here. I cut out so much. But I wanted to highlight 3 specific features of Nganasan linguistics that I found the most interesting when doing research. The first one being vocabulary of unknown origin. Basically, a decent chunk of the vocabulary is of an entirely unknown origin. At least for now, if I have anything to do with it. But as in, a lot of the vocabulary seems to be unrelated not just to any other Uralic language, but to any other language in the region at all. Languages have always influenced each other, so if you spend enough time looking and comparing different ones, you'll eventually start seeing connections here and there, often going back thousands of years, which gives us clues into the history of human migration before there was any written record of anything. Even if it's hard to see at first glance, every member of the Uralic language family exhibits a certain amount of shared origin of vocabulary and grammatical features. That's what unites these languages and shows the family connection and shared histories. Which in turn is also quite often backed up by DNA evidence and also sometimes even archaeological evidence, but that's really beyond the scope of this video. In any case, to find out what the hell is up with this vocabulary, Nganasan was even compared to languages from other neighboring language families who have always had historical interactions due to living in the same general region. Languages such as Dolgan, Yukakhir, and various Tungusic languages, and while of course there has been a lot of exchange of loanwords over the years, when it comes to the specific weird vocabulary in Nganasan, still linguists have found nothing. The point is that there exists a substantial amount of words in Nganasan, the origin of which is so far an unsolved mystery. Nobody really knows where they came from or how they ended up in Nganasan, and honestly, it's not really a guarantee we'll ever find out. And that's absolutely fascinating to me. The next feature I want to talk about is dual pronouns. We've talked about dual pronouns a bit in this channel before, but basically in English you have the singular pronouns I, you, he, she, it, and you have plural for when it's more than one person, we, you or y'all, and they. Now imagine another category called dual pronouns, when it's specifically two of something. If English had this, it would be different words for us two, you two, and them two. Sometimes it's even more complicated than that, because some languages like to throw in gender, formality, inclusivity, and a ton of other fun stuff into the mix. But that's beside the point. Dual pronouns are a relatively common thing around the world. Arabic has it, for example. Austronesian languages have it. Especially Polynesian languages absolutely love their dual pronouns. When it comes to Uralic languages, it's theorized that dual pronouns used to be a standard feature in Proto-Uralic. But fast forward thousands of years, and most major Uralic languages, like again, Finnish, Estonian, Hungarian, have lost this feature. Today, it's only present in most Sami languages and the Samoyedic languages, like Nganasan. Nganasan actually has what I think to be the most aesthetically, functionally, and psychologically pleasing system I've personally seen so far. Just look at it. Mene tene siti, mi ti siti, mung ting siting. That's it. It's a beauty, isn't it? Moving on to the third feature I find most interesting, consonant gradation. To understand this, we first need to talk about what consonant mutation is. Consonant mutation is when consonants within words change for various morphological or syntactic reasons. This is found literally all over the world, and there's plenty of examples of this in English, so here's a few to help you wrap your head around it. The s in confess changes to sh in confession. The z in fuse, which is more of a Z sound, changes to zh in fusion. What's up with that? Well, it so happens that humans possess this remarkable ability of finding ways of making something easier, in this case pronunciation, only to end up creating another problem in the process. In this case, confusion. I'm really proud of that one. And in most languages, there's usually some sort of pattern to it. In Russian, for example, there's the whole g чередуется на zh, k чередуется на ch, and stuff like that. Celtic languages might be one of the most well-known examples of this, just for how much of a central role it plays in those languages. Like, if you've ever studied the Celtic language before, you'll know that there's nothing they love more than mutating initial consonants. But I digress. Back to consonant gradation, which is a specific type of consonant mutation found specifically in Uralic languages. But from my very basic understanding, consonant gradation sometimes has a grammatical aspect to it. Let's take Finnish as an example. Ranta means a beach. Rannala means at the beach. Helsinki is Helsinki, but Helsingissa means in Helsinki. These are just two basic examples relating to the locative grammatical case in Finnish, but you can still see the sound changes going on within the word. Another cool example of this is from Votic, a severely endangered Finnic language spoken in a village or two just outside of St. Petersburg, Russia. Luku, number, becomes lugud in the plural. Karsia, to trim, becomes karzid when it's you doing the trimming. And it even happens to Russian loanwords like shapka, which becomes shabgad in the plural. Now, there's a whole lot more that goes into it, the way it manifests and how it depends on syllable structure and what makes this different from other types of consonant mutation, but we're not really going to be going into all of that because it's not what this video is about. Anyway, you sort of get it, and now after such a long-winded and probably incorrect explanation of what consonant gradation is, I'm here to tell you that what it is itself isn't what caught my attention to it. What really caught my attention to it is the fact that despite this being a distinctly Uralic feature, nowadays, consonant gradation only exists in most Finnic languages, most Sami languages, and specifically Nganasan, not even other Samoyedic languages. Let me put this into perspective. You have the Finnic languages and the Sami languages here, right next to each other, and then you have Nganasan, way over yonder. They're about 3,000 kilometers apart and have been separated for thousands of years. The languages in between them, like Udmurt, Mari, Erzia, and even including Hungarian hiding over there in the corner, none of them have consonant gradation. Not a single one. Not even other languages from the same branch as Nganasan, the Samoyedic languages. That's pretty much what blows my mind about this. The fact that this specific form of consonant mutation, which mind you has been found nowhere else before, exists in Finnic languages, in Sami languages, and specifically Nganasan. Now some of you might be thinking, but hold on. Wasn't it kind of a similar situation with the whole dual pronouns we talked about earlier? How only Sami and Samoyedic languages exhibited this feature anymore? Isn't it kind of the same thing? Well, not really. First of all, dual pronouns are a common thing found throughout the world. And second, when it comes to Uralic languages, it exists in Sami and Samoyedic languages, which are two branches of the same language family, consisting of a few languages each, but still two whole separate branches nonetheless, that have this feature in common. On top of that, there's historical evidence to suggest that dual pronouns existed in other Uralic languages in the past, and so it's not that much of a coincidence and not really that weird. It's just interesting to explain in this video for context because it's a feature that doesn't exist in English and most other common European languages. But for consonant gradation, it's a feature, the specific mechanisms of which exist solely in Finnic and Sami languages, two branches of the same language family in very close proximity to one another, and specifically Nganasan, but not the whole Samoyedic branch, just Nganasan, which, as discussed earlier, is the weirdest and most divergent of them all. And this is part of the reason why. Furthermore, Nganasan doesn't just do it, it does it with style, baby, and way better than anyone else. According to Helimsky, once again, the abundance and complexity of productive morphonological alternations place Nganasan to an exclusive position among the Uralic languages. This realization led me down a rather lengthy rabbit hole of crazy theories trying to explain this connection. How did this happen? What makes Nganasan so special? One of the theories was this guy called L. Posti, who attributed the origin of consonant gradation in these languages to a Germanic influence. Now, I am far from an expert on this subject, but even when I was reading this, I thought to myself, Germanic influence on Nganasan? What's next? Basque and Georgian being a part of the same language family? Preposterous. What followed next was me discovering what has to be one of my favorite quotes from any academic work I've ever read. But how can Nganasan facts be combined with this hypothesis? Perhaps only by a daring statement that a certain yet unknown Germanic tribe migrated as far east as to the Yenisei River with the generous aim of telling the rules of consonant gradation to the forefathers of the Nganasans, and in accomplishing its mission, got frozen to death. Eugene Helimsky, what an absolute legend. He has written so much interesting stuff on the subject, and we'll definitely be seeing his name again in the future in a video relating to the Uralic languages at some point. People watching my videos don't seem to realize the amount of hilarious linguistic beef between researchers I get to read while doing research. I'm talking linguists like properly roasting and calling each other out in the most savage of ways, but using the most elegant language. And sometimes these arguments span like decades, and it's just glorious. Anyway, other than all that, Nganasan is full of a ton of other interesting features, such as the complex system of moods, aspect, tenses, the 7 grammatical cases, etc. I just really wanted to talk about these 3 specific things that really got me interested in Nganasan, but if you want to find out more specifics, there'll be tons of links in the video description below. There's one last thing I wanted to talk about, and it sort of ties in with the whole linguistic theme of the video while giving a broad understanding of the sociolinguistic situation as a whole, and I think it's just a very logical way of concluding everything. As we've said, there's many unique and complex grammatical constructions in Nganasan, and there were some that were previously recorded by researchers many years ago that nowadays are impossible to elicit from Nganasan speakers because they just don't use them anymore, and it feels like it's kind of slowly fading away. There was a guy called Matthias Castrén, a Finnish ethnologist from the first half of the 19th century, who's considered to be one of the pioneers of the study of Uralic languages in general. He went on a bunch of different expeditions to Uralic-speaking areas in order to document the languages, eventually reaching the Nganasan homeland where he noted down the grammar of the language. And then a good century and a half later, a group led by researcher Beata Wagner-Nagy also traveled there with the purpose of studying the grammar and creating a corpus for the language. I couldn't find exactly when they went there, but the grammar itself was published in 2018, so relatively recently. Anyway, when they got there, they were most likely basing some of the research on Castrén's notes from like 150 years ago. and there were some grammatical constructions recorded by Kastren that Wagner-Najd's group was having difficulty getting from Nganasan speakers. Because by then people stopped speaking it as much on a daily basis, and with Russian influencing not just the vocabulary but even the grammar, the Nganasan speakers that remained were probably not fluent isn't the right word here, but they weren't as able to recall specific grammatical constructions because they probably weren't used as often anymore. And so I found a sort of relevant, real recorded example of this, which will kind of help you understand what I mean here. It's a clip from a news broadcast from Russian national television in the Nganasan language from 2022, just last year. And when listening to the newscaster speak, you can hear a good chunk of her words being purely in Russian and just not translated in any way. Also, without understanding anything, it's pretty easy to tell that she has a rather noticeable Russian accent. I doubt Nganasans spoke like this 100 years ago. But anyway, here it is.
Дудинкатану бираде исё туристический форум. Танине принимающее участие на тумся за полярным озоне чера. Этно нона экотуризма, экскурсовода нона нукагананасана арктический туроператоров. Наградялы хезатысе куради семинары. Юхекю на мурсена милазе классы. Мы на съемочной группе Маканадё, качамаса мендядя визит-центр Тияха. Бираде города Кунины, монодём сувенира кирагатен сердце пельменя. All
things considered, still a pretty cool thing to listen to, considering it's a severely endangered language, on the brink, basically, and especially in such an official setting, you know, in a news studio. And there they are, speaking Nganasan. Maybe we'll go a bit more in depth on all of the social side of things in the video in the future, sort of like a part 2 type of thing, because there is just so much about the history and culture of the Nganasan people that I've read along the way of making this video, and it would just be a shame of just not including it at all. But for now, that's about it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. And now enjoy an outro of me trying to read some Nganasan and probably failing at it.
Bənde Nganasan եկəтукəнды нендя іконə хонсы хелиде əkilе мəнəй. СытыЭк хонды əkilе іконда сяру дүзытəндыlieх ихүтүlieх нягəə сүөарусə.